FBS/.com presentation.
FBS, the live PC first-person shooter chat show.
Hi everybody, this is Jock of Bash and Slash.com. Welcome to the 5th episode of FBS. Welcome back. We've been away for a little while and glad to be back. And speaking of coming back, we have Jim, aka Rudedog from FBSadmin.com joining us.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Thank you for having me back, or letting me come back.
Hey Jim, absolutely.
Like begging and pleading.
And it is evening this time. We're doing this on a special time, not live, but we're doing the best we can. Chris has had some sort of accident with his computer, and he's not here, and which is unfortunate. But in his place, we've got, I think, the last person I ever interviewed on Bash. Not that there's anything related about that, but he was there, I believe, on episode Bash 184 back in May of 2011. At the time, he was with KAOS Studios of New York, working on THQ's Homefront. I'm really, really happy to have him on here on FBS. Let me introduce Edmar. How you doing?
Thank you for having me back. I'm flattered and honored.
Dude, I'm honored to have you on. Hey, it's as I said, it's been a heck of a long time, going all the way back to the beginnings there of Homefront. You got to catch us up on what the heck has been going on with you, and maybe if you can just tell me. I mean, as I mentioned, you were a producer, right, on Homefront?
Yes, correct. On business relations stuff.
Business relations, and I forgot how we met, but we had a really good a bunch of casts actually together, and really looked forward to talking to you guys. And unfortunately, sadly, I love playing the game and Homefront, and unfortunately, we were all kind of shocked to find out that KAOS Studios was shut down as I guess it was part of some sort of a so-called strategic realignment a little while ago. I think it was in June, I think, of last year. What happened after?
Yeah, so I think THQ obviously has been going through a period of time in their corporate history of kind of changing directions a little bit, and I think they've kind of wanted to focus on a smaller number of IPs, whereas they were expanding their portfolio pretty quickly over the last few years with a lot of licensed stuff. And then Homefront and Saints Row and a couple other things were something that they were trying to build their own. I think they've done a pretty good job of it. But at the time, unfortunately for KAOS, New York City was just a very challenging environment for game development, in the sense that although there are some game developer studios there aren't too many big ones, and a lot of the ones are on the smaller scale, social kind of casual gaming, and there was no other AAA studio when KAOS was there, although more recently Avalanche Studios has opened up a satellite studio there, which is awesome. So
but back in March of last year, I think there were 17 employees. I think they were let go. The rest was in June. We'd been hearing rumors that the studio would be shut down.
Oh, in Avalanche?
No, just for KAOS.
KAOS, yes.
Yeah. I mean, did you suspect that news?
I think a lot of us realized that there probably wasn't going to be a long-term role with THQ and KAOS, because one of our biggest challenges working on Frontlines and Homefront was recruiting game developers with experience who to come to the area, because a lot of game development happens in other parts of the country. So and then I think that so part of that problem was that once we got them there, some people found they didn't really like it working in New York City. Also I think the studio, we had challenges with keeping everybody really, working really happily, and some of that was kind of written about in the press about how we had pretty extended crunch time, and I think that took its toll, and it just became a kind of difficult studio for THQ, I think, to envisioned long term. And after they made the decision to close the studio, I think they made a really smart decision to bring in Homefront 2's developer, which is Crytek. So that's pretty exciting that they're going to have a studio working on the sequel that has full control over the engine, so they'll be able to kind of do lots of pretty amazing things. I assume to make it really fit well with what they want to do with the game. So that's kind of exciting, and I think it's I'm very hopeful that Homefront becomes a very successful franchise for THQ. And even though KAOS closed, Homefront itself was our game. We did really well with those games.
You had
sold
over a million sales.
2.6 million copies, and was the sixth best selling console shooter of the year. So I think that's definitely we have a lot to be proud of there. Of course, we wish that it sold 10 million copies and was the #1 best-selling console shooter of the year. But I think that that it's a very challenging space to work in, very competitive. One of the things that we had difficulty with was really making a long, immersive single-player story. I think our single-player story was great, but it was definitely shorter than what a lot of people were expecting. Even though it's really on par with what other people even have done since then. I think what's happening is that single-player stories are just getting more and more expensive to produce. So the number of hours, gameplay hours, are not as high as they used to be when it was a little more affordable to make. So I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. And then after THQ closed KAOS, I pretty much moved the next day to Global Game Servers, which is where I work right now as a director of business development. So I'm basically, instead of working on one game for a few years at a time, which is what I did at THQ, now I'm kind of working on several games. For example, we were EA's primary hosting company for Battlefield 3. So we were responsible for deploying servers worldwide for that title. And I think right now my job is to identify other promising projects that we can work on, especially stuff coming from the indie world, to see what the next great games of tomorrow will be, so we can kind of partner with those guys. So it's pretty exciting to kind of work with multiple studios at the same time and kind of see what's happening. And I'm looking forward to heading out to GDC in a couple of weeks, and of course I'm going to see a bunch of KAOS folks there. And that's one of the great things too. We've been able to keep in close touch with everybody, and everybody's been very supportive of each other. And so I think everyone's gone on to really great things. We have some of our guys
in your new job. You're keeping Jim happy because he's playing Battlefield.
Oh yeah, is that true?
Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm playing Battlefield 3 when I'm actually home and not someplace in the country traveling. So
yeah. I think having working with a company like EA is great, and they're a great publisher to work with, and they always are developing really top-notch games. And so I think we definitely looking for more of those relationships. And so it's an exciting time for the game industry in a whole.
As I said, I was kind of heartbroken to see Homefront go. I'm sure that the reaction of the guys must have been fairly significant. To have heard that. I mean, you guys spent blood, sweat, and tears putting all that together, and then the work ends up going to Quebec, along with Crytek going in there. I know the Quebec government is putting in a lot of money to create some sort of business environment to that will allow developers and producers to go in there and create. They have a fairly benign tax environment to work in.
And that brings up a good question, Chuck. Whose idea was to move the KAOS Studios to New York City?
Well, I think so. The founding guy of KAOS Studios was Frank DeLise, and he basically, after he worked on Desert Combat and a couple other projects, he made a pitch to THQ to build a studio on this new IP called Frontlines, and he convinced THQ to put the studio in New York City, and I think that's so that's how we started. And then
there's not many other game developers in the city, correct?
No, but I think Frank's, Frank wanted to keep the team in New York because the team he'd been working with on his past projects were all based in the New York area, and he didn't want to split them up and move them all over the place. And he was able to develop, and we did have a really great talent base that we brought into New York outside of the original guys. So so that's how we got started there. Interesting.
You now, as I said, come out of that environment and landed at Game Server, and you said you were looking to identify indie games, or to have relationships with other folks that are making indie games, and if you. Have you found anything that?
Yes,
you like?
We have. So there's a bunch of guys actually that some of them I know very well because they'd worked on past projects that I've been involved with. But some guys put together a studio called 2 Dawn. That's number 2 Dawn, and they are about to release some great footage. I think they've released a couple of videos so far, but they're working on a game called Ravaged, which is a vehicle FPS or vehicular FPS, set in the kind of Mad Max environment, if you guys remember that movie. So it's going to be, it's basically, I think it's what a lot of the guys working on that project had always dreamed about doing, which is exciting to be involved with. From the company I'm with now, Global Game Servers, we're assisting them with all the server tech, and which is important for this game because it's all multiplayer. There is no single player, although there is a environment and a storyline for the game, but it's definitely a multiplayer game that's based on teams. And I think it's a dream come true for a lot of the guys working on it. Like I said, they have the first title that they worked on was Desert Combat, the Battlefield mod, and I think that having the opportunity to work on a multiplayer only game for the first time with the tech that's available now and with Unreal, I think this game's going to just rock. I think it's going to be awesome. Everything I've seen looks amazing, and the guys are working really hard to make this the best game they can. So I'm excited to be a part of that with the Global Game Service Company.
It's based, as you said, on a sort of a Mad Max sort of post-apocalyptic Earth, I guess. It occurs on Earth, or is this a fictional planet?
It's Earth. It's Earth. The storyline basically takes place in the future, and it's about a kind of apocalyptic, crazy things happening on the planet, and this smarter folks on the have been able to figure out a way to hide underground for a little while until things kind of cool down. So they do that. They kind of set up a society underground, and then they've left some people above ground that they couldn't bring with them, and including a lot of criminals and people who were in prisons. They just kind of left them there. And what happens when the guys come up above ground who were in hiding in the society they were creating to wait things out? When they come up, they realize that the things look very different. And that's kind of the setting between the two factions. And the prisoners obviously are a little upset that they were left for dead. And then you have the clash of the two sides. So they have very different kind of mentalities and skills that we'll be able to show off in the game. Pretty cool.
Right, and I guess the reason they went down below ground, if I remember, is due to the fact that the sun had some sort of solar flare or something like that, and it sort of was destroying life on the surface, which is what I guess why they needed to go down into the ground, I suppose.
Yes, So so that is that's basically it in a nutshell. Although I think they're going to release some cool backstory stuff on the game on the 2 Dawn website. So I would
it's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting that every time that there's an economic downturn, people start coming up with stories about apocalypse.
Well, what's crazy is that so some of the guys had worked on Frontlines and Homefront, and that storyline took a kind of, they ripped headlines from the news and used some creativity to come up with how some of this stuff would play out in the future in terms of the oil crisis and the the global economy and things like that, and the North Korea tensions, and through both games. It was amazing, but a lot of headlines that came out after the games were released or news about the games kind of mimicked what we were kind of designing the game, which was not anyone's. We were as surprised as everybody else that some of the stuff was playing out the way it was, kind of following along our fake storyline.
Right.
And I highly recommend people going over to the todawn.com website to check out the trailer. Very interesting.
Yeah, they just released one yesterday on the Gyro, which is a really, really awesome helicopter. Actually, I guess would you consider it a helicopter?
Yeah, it is. It's like two kind of rotating props, like I was saying earlier, and it's definitely one of the simplest helicopters you can make. A lot of home built kits you can buy. Actually, I was just telling Edmar earlier, Jim, that a friend of mine had one of these things.
Yeah.
They look fun. This one has missiles on it.
I don't know if the missiles were in the kit, but I know my friend was trying
especially
to
not the Canadian version, because I don't think they'll allow that.
We're not into the gunplay too much up here. There's really no need for it, I must say. Okay. We have socialized medicine. What is its status? Is it currently in development, basically?
Yes, so it's currently in development, and they've released, I think at the time we're talking now, I think they've released 2 gameplay videos showing off a couple of vehicles, and people will really get a feel for the grittiness of the game. It's based on the Unreal Engine, so there's going to be a pretty high quality bar in the game. And it's going to have, like I said, it's multiplayer only. So the plan is to release a dedicated server build when the game comes out. And I think they haven't provided a date yet for a release, but there looks like they're getting pretty close to things. So I would anticipate definitely within the next few months we'll be very close to being able to play this thing. So I think it's gonna be great.
And I noticed in the facts that for my audience that player-owned dedicated servers will be available, server tools, Archon tools, anti-cheat. There's a lot of really cool features here. So I don't know how you guys can do it, since no other developer out there can do it anymore.
Well, you know what it is? I think it's so if you get a bunch of guys together and who have had a passion for multiplayer game but never really had the opportunity to do it because of it just wasn't in the cards with other their past publisher studio jobs. These guys are really burning the midnight oil to make it work. And this is a game that they've always wanted to play, starting from the days of Desert Combat. And so this is basically like I said earlier, just kind of a dream opportunity to make the perfect multiplayer game that these guys want to deliver and play themselves.
Well, it's good to see that's where that's where it starts from. It starts from an idea. It starts from a desire to want to play the game yourself.
Yeah.
Which has always kind of worried me, or always kind of disappointed me when I see the major studios trying to make games that even the developers themselves wouldn't want to play, sort of thing, and the game sort of turns into kind of a fairly boring, almost formulaic thing. And
you can tell when the developers have a passion for something, or they have they're in it for the paycheck because they need to make a buck, and it just so happens it's they're coding, and it's just coding for video games. So it's really good to see that it takes a little further.
Yeah, the second piece of it, which is I think goes right in the same the same breath, is that it's really community focused development, where they haven't had much community development right now because they've been kind of getting everything working. But the plan is to really incorporate the community feedback into the features of the game, and the community manager is going to be spending a lot of time setting up those communication channels to work with the development team. And that's something too that you really working for a publisher, it's tough to do that stuff because there's a big marketing plan behind what you're doing, and everything has to be very carefully laid out so you don't step on anyone's toes, and you have everything kind of in line with how you want to market your game. But when you're doing something more like this on the independent level, you have much more freedom. So I think it's going to be an exciting way to see how the game evolves.
Speaking of evolution, we haven't, as I said, talked for almost a year, and in that year, so much has changed, I think, in the gaming landscape, and I just wanted to get both your opinions on what's been going on, and the big change, in my opinion, is indie developers are now have the ability to generate a little bit of cash. I think we saw that with Kickstarter earlier in the week there, Edmar, but the main thing that I've seen, the main shift has been from as I call it, free to pay type game. You can pay the pay for game and the free to play or the freemium type game model. And when people talk about the pay for type model, we're always talking about AAA games. And with THQ and with your own experience with Homefront, struggling a little bit. I know THQ's been having some problems recently. They've been facing being delisted actually on the NASDAQ just recently. It doesn't leave that many of these so-called AAA publishers remaining in the world, and would you guys agree that it's just pretty much EA and Activision, or is there anybody else that?
Well, I think that EA, Activision, Blizzard, those guys definitely have a very, very big investment in the AAA, doing AAA games. The 30, 40, $50 million budgeted games. There's a few others too. Obviously, you have Microsoft, but I think that I'm excited about this. I think it's fantastic. I think that if the publishers were smart, they would really embrace the smaller studios who are doing some pretty creative stuff and doing it much cheaper. Because the reality is there really isn't that much room for $60 games. $30 million budget games. It's super competitive, and unless you really have the experience and the money to be able to make something like that work, it's just going to be very difficult to make a lot of profit on it. So I think I like to call it free to try, because I think that's probably that's what it's all about. You're making a game available so that people can really test it out, which makes total sense. And $60 is it's a lot of money for people, right, to spend on games, especially when everything is so shaky now with people's jobs the past couple of years. So I think that people spending it needs to be much more selective. That's not to say that people aren't spending money on games, but you want to make sure that what you're spending on is something that you're really going to enjoy, and giving people an opportunity to experiment with the game and see if they like it, I think it's great. I think it's totally exciting, and it's going to open the door to lots of things that wouldn't have been possible a few years ago.
What we now, I guess, are calling AAA, I mean, the definition of the so-called AAA studio is something that I'm starting to wonder. It's actually starting to wonder aloud now. What AAA actually means? Does it mean that?
So when you go to a movie, right? You know when you're looking at a very Hollywood movie, whether it's something like Mission Impossible. Versus a movie that's more, more scaled down, more independent. Like I just saw a movie recently, Drive, which was pretty cool. I don't know how much lower budget it was in Mission Impossible, but I'm guessing it was much lower, even though it was a pretty quality film. So I think with games, you're going to have the Call of Duties and the Battlefields, and those kind of franchises are going to are going to exist, but there's really not that much room for other players in that space. So I think that their definition of AAA, it might change. I mean, I think originally AAA really meant, at least for me, when we were working on Frontlines, it was that we were working on a game for the consoles and for the PC. And to be able to do that, you really have to have a lot of tech and the infrastructure in your studio to be able to produce that kind of game. But I think it could also mean just very large budgeted game that like I said with the comparison.
But you hit the nail on the head. I think because you actually brought up the word motion picture, and I'm just thinking that to me the AAA games nowadays all think. Every AAA game that comes out, I mean, you talk to the lead developers or whatever in the game, and they all think that they're making a major motion picture. And then when you tell them that they're not, they get very defensive. They get very upset.
Well, I mean, I think when Call of Duty released, they were really, and actually Halo too. When those games are released, they're not competing with other games; they're competing with other movies, and that's the absolute truth. So whenever the game launches, they're definitely, they're more worried about what big blockbusters movies are coming out at that time, because that's so there is a very big blending, and it's funny. Some of the guys who left KAOS after the studio closed went to work for movie production companies, working on, because there is a lot of overlap in the technology that's being used to make some movies today and what's being done in video games.
But can any one of us honestly say that when we use the AAA designation, is it for the franchise or is it for the publisher? Because other than the same franchise over and over again, Call of Duty, Battlefield, we don't see Activision, we don't see EA, Valve releasing a new franchise into that AAA realm. So it's almost like when you say AAA, it's, oh yeah, the Call of Duty. It's it's another game in a long-lasting franchise, and it's not that just so happens to have a humongous budget, but it's not of the caliber of AAA. That's Major League Baseball. That's high professionals at a high level. And yeah, these people have been making games for a long time, but it seems like it's the same game rehashed year over year with a bigger and bigger budget, a bigger marketing budget. You don't see Activision or even EA come up with a new IP and be thrown into that AAA designation.
They don't dare to.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I think it's tough because they found a formula that works and is generating a lot of money. So why mess with it? So
AAA, just like the A repeats itself. It seems like these games are just they're building off the previous game in the franchise, and they're not. I don't see EA or Activision taking chances on a new IP. And rightfully so. They're making.
But Jim, admittedly, they don't take chances, and I can understand economically why they wouldn't. But let me ask you a question: when you go out and buy a game, when you get Battlefield, or when you get, if you ever decide to ever buy Call of Duty again, or Medal of Honor, or whatever, when you buy one of those games, are you buying it because it's going to give you, that sort of a movie thrill, or are you buying it for something else? I mean, are you thinking you're buying a game? Or are you thinking you're buying a movie when you buy it?
I'm old school, so I'm buying it for the game, the immersion, the interaction between myself and the environment, and not. I stay away from the movie-ish type games or the AAA games for the most part, because nowadays these AAA games are the same thing over and over again. And for me, as a PC gamer and an old-time gamer, they're taking away more aspects of what I expect in a game, and giving me less but charging me more. So I actually try to stay away from the glitzy movie type.
So you're not interested in the narrative side of it? You're not interested in the single player side of it?
No. And I used to joke years ago, I used to always joke about single player, like I never knew what that was. And I would rather play another human being, a social aspect. Granted, we're killing each other, but I would rather play multiplayer and not even worry about single player. I don't play single player. I never played single player in the past 3 Call of Duties that I happened to purchase or was given to me by Activision. Battlefield 3, I haven't played the single player. And if anything, maybe I may play the single player just to get a feel for the game. But for me, I'm a multiplayer type of guy.
All the games that you have mentioned are all AAA games. So have they failed you? Have the AAA game developers failed you, or made you feel like you didn't get all of what you could out of the game or whatever because you gave them money to develop a single player which you never use? I mean, is it a waste on you?
I would say yes and no. Some developers, I feel they have failed me in regards to what I'm paying for and what I'm getting. Other developers, and these are in the AAA realm, and I'm not going to name names. I'm trying to be very neutral here and be positive. And on a positive side, there is certain developers, the games that I play now that I really appreciate it. And it doesn't bother me that, maybe the single player is 50-60% of this overall package that I paid for. I'm happy with that. At least I know they made an effort on both sides of the coin. But personally, I'm not a single player type of guy. I would rather play with other people, social.
It's funny. I think it's definitely a challenge when you're making a game to figure out what is the audience you're going for, because there are people like you're saying that will just always gravitate towards multiplayer, and people that will always gravitate to single player. And obviously single player is much more expensive to produce, so you wonder why there's not a lot more people developing multiplayer only. I think part of it though is that there is a lot of the gaming audience is diverse, and I probably think if the numbers were really known, that we'd see a lot there. The mass market probably gravitates towards a single player because they just want to have a fun time. And the
certainly that's true on console, because somebody was telling me, a few of my friends who do play console were telling me that the reason they don't go online to play multiplayer is just because the experience is just horrible.
Yeah.
And they would much rather just pick up wherever they left off on a single player and have it tell them a story, which I just never understood as a
because
PC
on the
player.
single player, the player is the star. It was always the star, right? And a multiplayer game, more likely than not, you're getting beat by a 12-year-old, so you're not really the star so much. You might be, someone's kicking bag, punching bag.
But I can understand that, because if I happen to go by my daughter's room and she's she plays Xbox, she plays PS3 a lot. She's into consoles more, and she's got the chatter muted because it seems like you were playing with a bunch of 12-year-olds and they learned a lot of swear words over the summer and they want to use them, and so I can kind of understand it. In the same way on the PC side, that there's certain times when you're playing with a bunch of friends, and then there's one or two asshats, as we'll call them, will come in and kind of ruin it for you. So I can understand where a lot of people would like to get away from that and just enjoy the game by themselves without that background chatter. Which leads me into the free-to-play stuff, why we haven't seen more free-to-play on the single player. But like you said, it could be because of the cost involved. But that would be interesting to be able to play through single player and make it very difficult without these weapons that you have to earn or buy to help you get through, or to make it to the next level, or make it to the next checkpoint, or whatnot. So.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought it would be really cool if a publisher did something on the single player side, which is more episodic and not spend 3 years in a cave making a game and then release this big story. And if they were to do something that was more episodic, then maybe they can get away with doing it free to try, because then what would happen is maybe you can integrate advertising the way TV shows work. You can integrate advertising
and do it tastefully. To help them
so it's
justify.
immersive, right? So it kind of flows into the story, which it happens all the time, very well if you do it right. So that would be great. I think that's it would be really cool if the free to try phenomena breaks into the AAA single player experience.
Because in my mind, the first thing I think of to the free to play is that yes, it's free to play, but there is a cost in the background to help you progress and to get certain items in the game, and they want to get you to spend money because they need to make money. But if they're going, to me, with the free to play is that they seem to want to support the game on an ongoing basis, where these AAA titles, they sell you the game, they may sell you DLC, but then it's on to selling you the next game.
Right. That's a really good point. And I think that's a really valid view, because I think that is going to bring a lot of people over into the free to play development side of things, because they do want to make things, then they'll continue to work on them and stay on something that they really enjoy and just expand on it through feedback from players.
I didn't want to completely switch gears right away into free to play. We're going to hit that in a second, but I just, before we did that, I wanted to continue to talk just quickly about this narrative versus gameplay concept, because Edmar, you've had this experience with Homefront, because you had a game in Homefront that when it came out, the single player was probably one of the few single players that I've played in the last 5 years. I think you were like one or two that I've actually finished.
Great.
And it had a very strong narrative, and I can't say that is true for many stories that I've seen, and mainly because I like stories that have some sort of basis in reality, I suppose. And this
exactly.
But again, maybe I'm old, and maybe I don't have enough I don't have the same sort of sentiments that a lot of the younger folks have nowadays. But that's what attracted me to your single player in Homefront. The thing was, though, when Homefront came out, and the same thing happened with Battlefield 3, everyone complained that it was too short. The single player was too short, and that was coming from the console people.
Yeah. I think that So the challenge, I think, for my answer to that was, I think our single player was much more emotional and immersive than other single player games that I've played have been, and to bring it up to that level of quality and that type of emotion, I think was expensive in terms of making all the parts of the story. There was a lot of thought that went into every single scene in that game, from the art to the music to the dialogue. And I think doing a game like that, you can't do that and make that a 10-hour game. It's just a hell of a lot of work.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, there was a lot of the scenes at the beginning of the game actually were very emotional. You know, when you were seeing people being slaughtered on the streets or whatever, it was actually very visceral. It certainly impacted me, and it sort of set the tone for the rest of the single player. And this is sort of where I kind of argue with the folks who bring you sort of narrative-based games, because I don't think that, given the state of technology today, I don't think the video game is the right media to show that sort of narrative-based sort of content, something that like a movie does really well with actors. You know, because you just, unless you're trying to depict some stone-faced, sort of very gruff sergeant character, you know, video games don't really do a real good job of having people express emotion, and I just don't. It just doesn't come across. And
well, I mean, what about a game like Half-Life?
I wasn't emotionally attached. Let me put it that way. But
But there was definitely a narrative there and a story, and I think that.
But do I care?
It might not be emotional.
But do I care about the characters? Do I really care? I mean,
you don't care about Gordon? Oh my God!
No.
Now that you mention it, that was probably one of the only games that I've ever played single player. And I really enjoyed that single player because of the story, even though it was, it wasn't like Homefront where it's almost, believable. It could happen. It could have happened. Mm-hmm. Half-Life was, way out there with aliens and secret labs and whatnot. But, I don't know. Maybe I don't get attached to my video games as much as you do, Jacques. It's just.
But I didn't get attached to that narrative, and I only bring this up because where I was going with this was that this week they had the conference out in Las Vegas. I don't know if Jim, you were just there, so I don't know if you got a chance to go near it. But
I was stuck at our warehouse data center, so I wasn't able to get anywhere.
It was the Design, Innovate, Communicate, and Entertain conference, DICE conference, not to be confused with DICE in Sweden there, but it was DICE 2012, and probably Edmar knows all about this particular conference, but it's actually quite an auspicious event. It's more like, I guess it's developer only or business only.
It's kind of a let me see. It's kind of like a TED of one of the TED Talks, except for game development. And I think a lot of people are considering it kind of like a higher level of GDC.
I see. Okay, and invitation only, or just can anybody show up, or?
And I believe it's game developers.
But it's open. You have to be a game developer, but you pay to get in. It's not like you say you're a game developer and they let you in for free. Yeah. You say, I'm kind of, I've worked with the Quake tool, so I'm a developer, and pay us $1,800 and you can come in and sit through these classes.
Was that your nerd voice, Jim?
Yeah, it was.
I saw that. I could picture you with glasses and stuff.
That's my new voice. I haven't used that before.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I like that. But there is a fella, David Jaffe, and he said something. He had a really interesting little diatribe, and I can't remember if I tweeted this or not, but in essence, I just to really paraphrase him badly, he says basically something to the effect that putting narrative before gameplay is a waste of time, so stop doing it. So I thought it was really interesting, and actually I know that they quoted him on Gamma Sutra. They quoted him on GamesIndustry.biz. Anyway, and anybody sort of in that line of work in gaming, I mean, I think rip this guy a new one. I mean, they really kind of questioned his mental faculties for coming up by saying that the video games is the wrong again, it's the wrong media to to showcase narrative, and that's what he was saying. And they said no, it's the best. It's exactly the kind of media. And I just wanted your take on it. Maybe Edmar, did you see what David wrote? Or
yeah, I did. I think I think that he's probably going for some headlines there, but he comes from doing games like Twisted Metal, which is a hardcore battle with vehicles and weapons, where there's really not that much of a narrative there, but it's hell of a good time.
So what you're saying is a console game. I'm sorry, that was a dig out to all the console.
I wouldn't have expected that, Jim.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have expected that from you.
I had to throw that in.
But I mean, but the truth is, like what we were just saying, it's very difficult to do. And I think some of the games that I think the three of us like are more multiplayer focused. Where the reason why I like to play a lot of my games is because I'm playing with my friends, and it's just more fun. So the narrative really is like, we're making the narrative by telling the stories about, oh man, did you see that? That was so crazy when you did this, all that kind of. So we're making our own narrative.
Exactly. And actually, right. Jaff was not. He's and by the way, I think he also developed God of War. I mean, yes. He's got a lot of games under his belt. But he wasn't saying that he's totally against narrative. He's just saying, look, there's a place for narrative, and then there's a place that you shouldn't have it, and he actually talked about what is it, Elder Scrolls, Skyrim, and he was saying, there is a game where there is narrative, but the player makes the narrative, and that's a good thing. You don't want to have sort of a developer imposed narrative that sort of takes over the game. And I think he mentioned a piece out of Batman or whatever, where all of a sudden gameplay stops and the narrative takes over and you're just sort of watching a movie on your screen.
Right. Well, that's cut screens, and
that's cut screens, yeah.
Yeah, I think that sometimes gets me frustrated when I'm playing. I'm getting into this game. I've just made it past this difficult point, this apex of this level, and I'm getting ready to move on, and then all of a sudden I got to stop. I'm out of the zone. It's like halftime at the Super Bowl now for the players. I gotta what's going on now? I gotta watch this movie.
And then somebody flips you the bird, right?
Right. Well, yeah, and so in a way I can understand that, but I think it was just said that you playing the game helps create that story, and I don't know where he's going, but they even said that he's a very outspoken person. He's just trying to grab headlines sometimes.
Yeah, no, this isn't the first time he said something that was a little, I guess, a little challenging to the development community.
Yeah, see,
but then again, I'm looking at some of the quotes here in that article that you had linked to, Jock, and basically, I'm not trying to go back to the console thing, but it's almost like he's trying to get the console customer to relate to him by saying these things sometimes. So who knows?
Well, yeah, I actually had the opportunity to watch John Romero interview him when at the IGDA Leadership Conference a couple months ago near Los Angeles, and I think that was it was a great interview to watch. And these two guys are kind of legends. John Romero obviously did Quake and Doom, and still working on some pretty cool projects now. So I think that he's a very smart guy, David, and I think he has been in the industry long enough that when he says something, I think people do listen to it because he's got that experience and the resume that he's not just some new guy that's just trying to stir things up.
Yeah, but sometimes you have to hit people over the head. No, seriously, I think sometimes in an industry, in a culture, whatever, you have to hit people over the head. And we're seeing that in Greece right now. I mean, as an example, okay? You have to be able to, in order to be able to change the direction a particular culture, and I'm looking at gaming as a culture, in order to change that direction and maybe to bring it back. Because I think they've jumped the shark on this one. I really do. I think I remember talking to Lamia over at Treyarch a couple of years ago now, and he essentially bristled when I said, that he wasn't a movie producer. He was actually creating a game, and he said, well, tell me what the difference is between what I'm doing and what, I don't know, Steven Spielberg or whoever is doing. Tell me what the difference is. I have actors, I have a script, I have this, I have that, and I don't have a mouse in my hand, I guess, when I'm watching a movie and I'm watching them tell me a story. I'm just sitting there passively, whereas when I'm playing your game, it is a game and I'm trying to interact with it. I don't, I want a seamless experience, and I try to tell them, so there I am trying to tell them what gameplay is all about. It was really kind of embarrassing, but I'm just getting this feeling that right now they've just gone too far, and you can only go so far with this medium. There's no way to, right now at least, there's really no way to sort of give me that sort of the same thing I feel when I see an actress or an actor on the screen become emotional or something. I just don't get it right now, so it's just not happening for me. So therefore, I want a game to do what it does best, which is to make this thing fun for me and to give me gameplay that I enjoy, but that's just me. I just wanted to sort of explore that. I'm not sure what, I think you guys are have the same sort of mental space that I'm currently occupying on this, but I just wanted to see if it was just me, resonating with this guy, or if or both myself and Jaff are totally out to lunch. I'm not sure what. Because reading all these comments, I mean, they were just ripping this guy just to pieces. So.
Because a lot of people really spend a lot of time trying to do that, and I think more times than not they aren't successful at pulling something off the way that a movie can.
Yeah.
But that's not to say I do think though that I have seen it done in games before, and I think it really depends how much you let yourself go when you're playing a game to believing stuff, which has to happen in movies too. But it's hard to do in a game because it's more interactive. So it's definitely just a more challenging thing design-wise to pull off. So I think that in the future, I think that there will be that it'll get better and better as people are crossing over more from movies into games and vice versa, and there's more shared storytelling experiences going on. So I think I wouldn't say that it's not part of games in the future. I think it's definitely going to be there, and I think it'll probably be more so than it is now.
Yeah, it's to me it will always be gaming is today's comic books, and I never confused a comic book with a novel. Mm-hmm. It had its own rhythm, and there is a story in a comic book. There is a story as well, I suppose, in a single player game. I think that they both have different pacing, and there's a different feel to it. And once you give up your mouse and let the game take over to tell you a story, you no longer have a game. And I think that's sort of where this fellow was going. But it's kind of interesting to explore. I do definitely see a glimmer of an idea that he's trying to put across, and hopefully it'll turn some heads and turn some people into thinking about what the narrative in a game is all about, which is really, really good. And there are other games starting up. We were talking about free to play. Jim was talking about free to play earlier. It's rocketed into prominence this year. Free to play, the whole idea. It's almost like now the only thing people are talking about is free to play versus AAA. Which is kind of interesting. And if AAA is all about making like a movie-like experience, what the hell is free to play all about? I don't know.
Pure fun. I think that free to play's challenge is to make the people developing those games, or to make games that are going to really pull people in. So, and that takes a lot of work. What kind of things you're going to put in front of the player to really keep them immersed into what you're offering. So it like we were talking about earlier, I think that's just going to be a really important part of game development is, finding the things that people are going to keep people want to come back and telling their friends to play. So, I think, like I said earlier, it's going to be, I think that's just where everything's going. I totally believe it.
What I don't understand, I understand to a certain extent, and it seems like when I hear free to play and I look at a success story, I look at Battlefield Heroes. It seems like it's a huge success for DICE and EA for that franchise. However, my gut doesn't really say, are they making money? Will this new concept last?
It may not last for the big producers just because of their economic model, but I think for a smaller, more lean organization, or maybe a third world or a second world organization, maybe like overseas or whatever, it might be just the ticket.
Right.
That's my
and it could be. I'm hoping that it succeeds. And is the success now currently with free to play because of the resurgence with PC gaming? Is it something that these small indies can't afford to go and develop for, say, the Xbox platform, or is it is there a vast treasure of gold for these small indie developers that they can find and dig up with the free to play model? I just you hopefully within next year at this time we'll be looking back and saying, hey, World of Tanks is going strong. They've released several of their other pieces. Some of the Battlefield Heroes is still going strong, and that's branched out into several other pieces. And maybe Activision will come up with a free to play game for one of their major franchises. It's just, are they making a lot of money, or are they making enough money to survive and move forward? And I think you've said, Chuck, you've had some conversations with the World of Tanks developers. Are they looking? Is there a somewhat bright future for them?
I think they're going gangbusters.
Thanks to Jock.
No, not thanks to me. I've just been telling you guys. They were going gangbusters before I even really kind of started following them seriously, and but they fall into the category of being in Belarusia, and their cost structures are different. A lot of the folks who are sending them money, are paying steeply, I think, personally. We're saying free to play, but in reality, it's a freemium game. You're actually paying for stuff to help you with the grind. They will allow you to earn XP slightly faster than the average person if you pay them a little bit. For like a subscription, basically for a year-long subscription, it's over like $100. So you're paying them. You're paying these guys in. I think in American dollars, and they're spending them in Belarusia. So I have a feeling that the chance for them to make money is a lot higher. There's a lot of pluses, of course, with a free to play game, and that you have access to a lot of people. But that's one of the things about free to play. In order to make it viable, I think you have to attract people who will want to pay a little bit for your game, or else you can't just give it away for free. That won't last, that economic model. So you have to monetize it somehow. It'll have to fund the game somehow. So your demographic will have to have some money, and that they're willing to part with. And also, you have to attract a lot of people, because only a certain percentage will give that money up. So to some extent, I think free to play in the future will kind of have to dumb itself down a bit to the lowest common denominator, because you want to attract as many people as you possibly can to the game. That's the only thing that really worries me at the moment, is that there's a lot of indies out there that are creating free-to-play games, thinking that, okay, this is how they're going to do an end around, all these producers with big, marketing budgets and all this. We're just going to create a free-to-play game. If you make a game that is very niche-y, there are not that many people playing it, then you better aim it at a group of people that is willing to support you and to support the game, which means they better have some bucks in their pocket.
Well, I mean, the other thing they can tie into is advertising within the game, which isn't really done on a lot of the games that we like to play yet. But on the casual social gamings that make a lot of money, that's basically their primary revenue driver. A perfect example is Words with Friends, which is one of the most popular games right now. And I know that there are several family members, including my wife, that are playing this game constantly. It only costs $1, but nobody pays because they just look at the ads.
Who just got thrown off a plane for playing that? Let me think.
Alec Baldwin.
Alec Baldwin, yeah.
And it's funny because the new Best Buy commercial, the two developers are on there, and their little shtick was they're talking about their game Word with Friends, and the stewardess walks over to them, and they have to shut it off really quick, which was kind of humorous.
It's funny.
My wife plays it as well. I mean, it is very popular.
But does that type of game tend to be better? I can understand the ads are there. I could be playing Words with Friends, and my wife plays it. I don't really care for the game too much, but you see an ad, you can click on the ad, and you can then go from the game into that ad. Where the games that we tend to play, it's very hard for them to monetize those ads, or track those ads, or other than just having a billboard for Coca-Cola and. Hopefully they're just looking at impressions. They're not looking for click-throughs and just a share of voice type thing.
Well, I don't know. I guess, like I said, I don't think it's been done really well yet, but that's not because it can't be done. I do know that in the current games that have billboard advertising, they definitely incorporate code into the game that they can tell the advertiser how many seconds the player was looking at that billboard for in the game, and that's valuable data. So, and they might even get paid.
Can they tell how many times I actually shoot that billboard?
Of course. That's I don't know whether they want to look at that, but yeah, of course.
I envision myself playing with Jacques, and Jacques running behind the billboard, trying to duck for cover, and me just throwing rounds downrange towards the billboard. And am I really paying attention to that billboard or the person behind it? But I understand, and I think that's the next step. I think that'll help the free to play, and I've always dreamed that would have helped monetize some of these other games that we were paying for $60 for. We'd see some more of that, but instead of paying $60, we'd be paying $35. But sometimes the developers get a little greedy, and they would still rather charge me more money for the game and pocket those advertising dollars as well. That upsets me more.
No, I agree. I think it's interesting to see or kind of predict what's going to happen, because what's happened in the past few years is we've seen the gaming population explode in terms of the numbers because of the social casual games that are happening, including Words with Friends. There are people playing that game who don't play the typical FPS, obviously, right? And there are a lot more of those people who don't play FPSs than who do. Right. So it's really interesting to see how, now that these people who haven't been playing games for maybe a few years, but they're now getting back into it because these games are coming out that are really easy to play and just very fun and addicting and more social. Is how are these new population of gamers going to combine with the existing hardcore gamer market? Are they always going to be separate, or is there going to be some kind of convergence, and then a new type of game which is kind of in between these two is going to come about? I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Outstanding segue, because that's exactly what I would like to talk about on the next FBS. If you guys are willing to come on again. We've pretty much exhausted the hour already, and there's so much to go on the free to play, because on next week's show, I also wanted to get into how free to play solves piracy, how it solves hacking, how it solves support problems, and also eliminates the risks for consumers. So
wow,
we've got tons.
I'm excited to hear this.
We've got tons of topics for the next cast, but we sort of I wanted to sort of set the table for it, to sort of talk about AAA and then sort of head into free to play. But there's more coming, hopefully, in the next cast when we get together again. And it was. Just wanted to say thanks, guys, for coming. It was a bit difficult to get all you guys together today.
No, that's my fault.
Edmar had a squirrel problem.
I did.
We had to
blame it on the squirrels.
We had a squirrel problem, and then Jim's internet went down, so it's taken a while for us to get together. Yeah. But hopefully, we'll get all you guys in there next week. Of course, Jim Rudedog, FPS admin.com. Thanks, man.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
And Edmar, what do we have a link for you? I mean,
I guess let me see, global game servers. If you're a publisher or independent studio and you're looking to, looking for some help on servers for your game, look us up and I'll be glad to help you.
So give us the link.
Definitely check out tudon.com for the Ravage project.
So give us the link for the game server.
Just globalgameservers.com.
Okay, and then to look at Ravage, do we go to Tudon?
Yep, tudon.com.
Tudon.com. Thanks, guys, for coming on, and I hope you guys come back next week, and we can continue.
Thanks, guys. It was great.
Take care.
Thank you.